Good evening, everybody. Let me just get the meeting started here. Just as a preliminary matter, my name is Peter Carlson. I'll be chairing the Grafton Select Board meeting this evening. Select Board members, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative that you're here. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio here.
Often?
Often here.
Frisbee?
Frisbee here.
Roy?
Roy here.
Carlson is here. Staff members, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative when I call your name. Police Chief Crapo?
Crapo here.
Town Planner, Mr. McGoldrick?
Chris McGoldrick here.
Zoning Enforcement Officer, Building Inspector, Mr. Berger?
Burger's here.
And Fire Safety Inspectional Officer, Mr. Colleen.
Colleen here.
Thank you. Tonight on our agenda, Mr. Belfiore. We can respond in the affirmative.
Yep, I'm here. I'm at work, so I have to wear my mask.
Understood. And Miss Foley.
Here.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature any public comment for any public hearings. For this meeting, the Select Board is convening via Zoom and is posted on the town's website for identifying how the public may join. Note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conferences. Also, please be aware that others may see you and take care to not screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please note that all supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website when the final minutes are posted, unless otherwise noted. Please, public, I'm encouraging you to follow along using the posted agenda unless I will note otherwise. Before we turn to our first item on the agenda, before we do so, please permit me to cover some ground rules for an effective, clear conduct of our business meeting tonight. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I, the chair, will go down and ask the board members, inviting each of you to participate in any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. And finally, if there's any votes that need to be taken tonight, they'll be done by roll call vote. Before we get into our meeting agenda, I just have a couple of announcements I would like to go over. And let me get there. Just a reminder that town meeting will be held on June 5th at 11 a.m. on the Grafton Athletic High School football field. The rain date for June 5th will be June 6th at 11 a.m. Please note that local elections will be held on Saturday, May 22nd. Polls will be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Precincts 1, 2, and 3 will vote at the Grafton Middle School located at 22 Providence Road. Precincts 4 and 5 will vote at the Millbury Street Elementary School located at 105 Millbury Street. The last day to register to vote in person for annual election is Wednesday, May 12th. You will be able to register at the town clerk's office from 2 to 4 p.m. as well as from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. The last day to request a mail-in ballot is Tuesday, May 18th at 5 p.m. On May 1st, the recycling center moved. It is now at the DPW facility located at 64 Old Westboro Road. With the change in location comes a change in the operating hours. Please note that the recycling center schedule will be Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And finally, the Community Harvest Project will be holding their annual Plantapalooza online again this year. The online store will be open May 6th to monthly givers and to the public May 7th. Please, pickup will be at the Community Harvest Barn on Friday, May 14th and Saturday, May 15th. For more information, please visit the website at www.community-harvest.org. Thank you. And tonight, I was asked if I would indulge Ms. Foley. She wanted to join public comments to notify us in the public about a program. Ms. Foley, if you would like to have the floor, go ahead.
Hi, great, thank you. Just as a note, it's also International Compost Awareness Week, which bodes well with what I wanted to bring up. But in any case, last year I spent some time, can you hear me all? Okay, some time researching composting, curbside composting for our town, and landed on a company called Black Earth Compost. So for about the last 6 months, there's a number of folks in town that have been using that service. And I just wanted to share with the board, as well as folks in town, that this service is available for a fee in our town right now. And I thought it might be interesting to the board, given that we have some issues with the costs of our trash at this time. In addition, they also offer municipal programs as well as school programs. So we basically have a weekly service. Pickup is tomorrow. It's every Wednesday here in Grafton. There is a truck that goes by. You might be starting to see the bins out. We have about 35 people right now that are participating. Like I said, there is a fee. It is a private company. In terms of benefits, we all get a bag of compost every spring for participating, in addition to the fact that we're certainly using much less trash bags through the town. Basically, in Massachusetts, I think the statistics is about 20% of our waste, 20% of the weight of trash is food waste. That includes, doing other things such as using your kitchen disposal and whatnot. So I just wanted to let people know that it's out there. I started it as we have I did a Green Up Grafton initiative. So it's a Facebook page right now. So the information is available on there. A lot of people are a part of that group, and we are, doing a lot of different things. And this is just something that we worked on last year that I thought the town and maybe the townspeople might be interested in.
All right, thank you, Ms. Foley. Does anyone have any questions about the program that Ms. Foley discussed? Okay, well, thank you very much.
I do.
Thank
I
you.
was just
Oh, I'm
wondering-
sorry, Ms. Wright. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You never see me. It's fine. I was just wondering what the fee was.
Yeah, so the initial fee for a regular bin, I think it's a 14-gallon or 13-gallon bin. There's also an apartment size, which is less. But the initial thing for the bin, as well as the bags, is $34, and that's just kind of a flat fee. And then after that, it is $99 for 6 months, which I think equates to about $17.99 a month. The costs do go down the more people we have involved. So if we get to 500, let me just check my notes. It goes down to $69 for 6 months, which is $12.99 a month. If we get to 1,000, it's $49.99 a month. And I didn't do the math on that for the monthly cost. So the more people we get involved, the cheaper it is for all of us. So right now, it's, just to answer your question more simply, it's $99 for 6 months with the additional $34 one-time fee for the bins and the bags. And you get bags for the actual bin, and then you get the small compost bags that you can use in your kitchen, however you choose to do that. We just have a little bin in here. It's great. They take pizza boxes. There's a lot of things on their list that you wouldn't expect. And for me, just pizza boxes is a great one, because those cannot go in your recycle bin, even though unfortunately people are doing the wishful recycling with them. They should be going in your trash. But there is a list on their site of all the other things that they take. It's pretty extensive.
Thank you. Ms. DeFazio?
Yeah, thanks. A comment and a question. So I've been part of this program since Anne Marie initiated it, and it's been great. I also Just wanted to say that, we obviously are paying the monthly fee, but we're saving almost just as much in trash bags because, like she said, it's amazing how much food you throw out. And if something it smells and you have to put it into its own bag. And the other thing is they compost textiles. So, towels, clothes, curtains, anything like that. They will give you bags and you put a sticker on it too, and they take that. So that's really helpful. And my question is, and this is really for the board, and Evan, is there anything we can do to promote this in the town beyond this Green Up Grafton Facebook page? Because it would be a really good program to get out to residents. And even though it's something that a resident set up and not us, I would like to take this on as just maybe promoting it on the town's website or something. So people are aware of it if they're not on Facebook.
And just, Peter, can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Foley. Yep.
Sorry, just in research or looking a little more into it today. By the way, I'm not employed by this company. I have nothing to do with them. So this is just something I'm doing aside. But the DEP does offer a grant through Sustainable Materials Recovery Program. And that other towns have used that to help pay for the bins and implement the program in the town. So in other words, you get a grant to offer residents the bins, the upfront cost. And I think then you go from there. And that would just get us to where maybe more people are participating and then bring down that monthly fee. But that's something that if the board were to be interested, I haven't looked into that at all, but that's something that's out there.
Evan?
In my former employment, we actually used that grant process to buy composters that went into people's yards.
Mhm.
And I am familiar with that grant process. So that's something, if the board is interested in, we can definitely look at doing something like that. It's a cool process. We go to this, I call it the Trash Summit. I don't know what it's actually called. You go to Framingham and it's all the vendors. But I've met a few of these curbside composting companies, and they're doing some really innovative, cool stuff. It sounds like it's going to be horrible going to the Trash Summit, but it's actually really cool. There's a lot of different stuff happening out there. So I'd be happy if the board wants us to look into that.
I'm wondering if we could add this to maybe do you have enough time, Mr. Broussard, to add it to like our next workshop agenda for next Tuesday?
Sure.
Is there enough time to maybe prepare something and we can have a more in-depth discussion about that? And obviously, Ms. Foley, if you would like, we can invite you there. If you have maybe some further input for the board, we can go over that offline. But if that works, I don't know how the rest of the board wants to move forward, but that's an option that we could probably explore.
Yep, we can put something together. William just reminded me that we have RDP money that can be used towards composting. Don't ask me what RDP means. It's a DEP acronym. I can't keep up. But so we can add that to the conversation as well.
Okay. Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm full support of this program. I'd love to see it promoted. I think it's a great sort of on-ramp to whatever our next trash contract is going to look like. Hopefully that will have something that is a town, contracted service that we can offer to residents to, it's so much better to take the sort of bulk weight of food and compost it versus throwing it in the trash in the incinerator. So I'm in full support.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay. Ms. Foley, thank you very much for coming in tonight. Stay tuned. We'll add this to our next agenda on our workshop next Tuesday. Thank you very much for coming in. All right, next up on our agenda tonight, we have change order to Childscape's contract, airport park update. Mr. Broussard here is going to give us an update on what this change order is for.
Yep, here I am. So if you're not familiar with the project at Airport Park, I don't want to go too much into the minutia, but basically we added an accessible walkway around the perimeter of the park and to certain features of the park so that they are now fully accessible for folks that may be mobility impaired. There was an issue in which if you're standing in the parking lot, there's a part of the path that's on the right-hand side was installed too close to basically that third baseline for the Little League field. And it would have put that in play. Now, there are some issues that I don't believe are, I believe that this is an us problem. I think that we had some errors in what we approved as far as the location. And that, is not the responsibility of the contractor because they put the walkway where we told them to put it. So we would need to approve a change order to relocate that walkway farther away from that outfield position of the Little League field. The section of walkway has already been removed because regardless of the status of the change order, it can't stay there. It's a safety hazard in its current location. So that was removed. That's kind of the whole thing. So, when something like this occurs, which is hopefully extremely infrequently, you do a little root cause analysis and try to figure out where it is that problems occurred. And, I don't want to play the blame game as far as, we were in a pandemic, but it definitely factored in with some communication difficulties. And I think some things getting kind of overlooked. So we do currently have enough funding to relocate this within the original appropriation. And so what we're looking to do is ask the board to approve that change order and then allow us to move forward and put that in the right spot.
All right, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Often?
Yeah, Mr. Brassard, I took a trip up there to take a look at that because there was some resident concerns about the torn up turf.
Yes.
I'm wondering if this appropriation, the change orders, obviously going to cover that because I can see that if we approved, a location of the accessible path, and we'd be responsible for relocating that. The other bit of it seems like it would be more on the contractor. So I'm just wondering if you could address that.
So we, I know that Paul Conoyer was able to meet with the contractor and go over the damage to the field that was incurred when they put the walkway in. And that contractor has agreed to make us whole on that. And they're doing the work themselves. They have already graded it out and I believe seeded. They did repairs to the irrigation system. They will need to come back later and add some loom and seed again. But they so far have been very good to work with. It was a subcontractor that did the damage. The overarching company that contracted the sub was immediately responsive to, yeah, that's not right, and they'll fix it. So far so good on that repair.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks.
All right, any questions on the change order and the status of airport from the board members? Okay, seeing none, I can entertain a motion for the change order.
I move the board vote to authorize change order number 3 dated April 30th, 2021 in the amount of $21,849 to the Childscapes contract.
Second.
I have a motion made a second for the change order. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. I want to ask the board real quick if we could move something out of order tonight and potentially talk about Mr. Belfiore's entertainment license that he has for us before we get into the restaurant outdoor seating safety. So I didn't know how the board felt, if it wanted to have that discussion first or the second way. Is there any takers? Okay, I see a couple thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to take this out of order then. So we're going to talk about under new business section A, outdoor entertainment license here for Mr. Belfiore for the Grafton Grill and Crust. Good evening, Mr. Belfiore. Do you want to give us an overview of what you're seeking here from us tonight?
Yep. So we're looking to extend. So we've got approval from you guys about a month or so ago to have entertainment. But now we need to get approval or the extension to have the entertainment outside. As you know, I spoke about it before. We're not a huge music type establishment, but we did have a great feedback from our customers last year when we had the tent outside. We had the music on the back side of the tent. The setup was nice, and we're just looking to do that type of thing again.
Great. Does any of the board members have any questions? Do you need me to screen share anything? Any questions? Ms. Roy?
So I just have a couple questions, and we asked the other entertainment license these same questions. So the first one is going to be the times that you have written down here. We kind of limited the times till 8 o'clock on weekdays. I think it was Sunday to Wednesday, and then 9 o'clock on the weekends. So would you have issue with that at all if we were to, alter those hours, or you'd obviously listen to that, correct?
Yeah. No,
All right.
I did. Did I put times down?
Yeah, you wrote 4 to 9 on all the days except Monday.
Oh, right. Yeah, we usually, we close at 8 during the week, and we close at 9 on Fridays and Saturdays.
So it's gonna work out perfect.
Yeah, I think I just put that because we weren't really sure what we were gonna do. I just figured I'd ask for more and get less later.
Okay. Peter, do you mind screen sharing this?
Absolutely. 1 second.
And then one thing too, Colleen, we don't have, as you guys know, the way the block is, we don't really have any neighbors. We actually own the house on the other side of the river, which is a rental, but most of everybody else, with the exception of the other side of the restaurant, which is the Ramos, there's no residential in the area. We never had a complaint, but it does help not to have residential in the area either.
Yep. Which is great. So my other question is, where your tent is located, I thought we were told at one point that whole parking lot was going to be closed. Are those spots, those handicap spots and those 3 spots, are those still active, or once the tent is being used, will that parking lot be strictly for patrons and no cars?
Yeah, those are active. We can't not have handicap parking.
Okay.
So
what type of barriers are you putting in place between those cars and diners?
There are no barriers.
No barriers. All right. So I guess taking this out of order might have been a little, for me anyway, because I know that was a pretty heavy conversation we had with the other restaurant owner for the exact same situation where there's cars right there, and I don't know how the board feels about that.
Yeah, I know we have that discussion after the fact here. I know we've already issued one with their plan that was reviewed. So I guess at this point, does any of the other board members, have any other questions based on this application for this permit? Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, I also share the same concern. We have to be consistent with what we're telling people here. Although candidly, and Steve and I had this conversation already, we've already let one of these go. So I don't know that that we're necessarily in a position to say that these guys have to do something that we didn't just require for somebody else. But I want to make this suggestion, Steve, if I can. I know it's an expense, but there are concrete barrier rentals, 10-foot rentals for $180 a month. I did ask Mr. Brassard to reapproach DPW to see if they had anything that they would be willing to either rent out or lend, and apparently no, those water-filled ones that they have are chock full of leaks from past jobs. I think the best that we could do is just encourage you to have that sort of thing in place. And I'd be more than happy to note publicly that, we're trying to work with businesses here, and, businesses are doing the best that they can to make people safe. This is a sort of a patchwork thing that we're doing here where, we didn't used to have outdoor dining at all. There's COVID, people enjoy it. But again, simply because we didn't have any incidents previously doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to have any going forward. So I would just encourage you guys to consider putting something in place to keep patrons safe.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I mean, you and I talked a little bit about this, but I've got a bunch of notes about the rentals, and you are correct. The rental part of it is cheap, but they also charge you for the crane to come $450 to drop it. So your renting is cheap money, but then they got to pick it back up because you don't own it. So that's another $450. I got prices anywhere from $900 to $1,200 for two of these things. I told you I was concerned about this last year before we even did it because I've seen some other towns and areas where cars have gone into pedestrian areas like this outside. However, like I said, I even went down to the town. I tried to do all the right things to talk to certain people, and I looked into the water ones. Now I just don't feel that those are even. They might stop a car, but they're not going to stop a car that hits the gas coming out of a handicap spot, at 35 miles an hour. It's just going to go right through it. It's plastic. So there should be something, I think, when we approve the tents, it should be a part of that. The entertainment license is something totally different. That's my point of view. The tent is what the customers came, and that's where they'll be dining, whether we have music or not. So I would look at it like that.
Yeah, and I see your point. I'm just going to disagree with you a little bit and remind you, and I'll tell you the same thing I told Sean Briggs when he was here. Chapter 183A allows us to approve these entertainment licenses. And one of the things that we consider when we approve these things is safety. Safety and noise are basically the two big things. You guys don't have really any close neighbors. I would encourage my fellow board members to be as lenient as you can with noise because this is a particular situation where we're trying to help businesses. But safety is a consideration that this board gets to account for when issuing these licenses. And I'm just going to tell you the same thing as a lawyer that I tell all my clients. I understand about upfront costs. There isn't a person that comes in to see me in my office that doesn't wish that they didn't invest in an ounce of prevention over the very costly cure that I represent when they come into the door. And I get it. It's, $180 a month and then the 900 or 1,200 to come and go. Should anything happen, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but should anything happen, the cost associated with that is just astronomical. In something that you don't want to have to bear. So we're in a tough spot here because we are where we are, I don't want to treat you any differently than we treated somebody else. But so I feel like all I can do is strongly suggest to you that, it's an expense, but I think one that you'll be glad to have it borne, I think when all is said and done, and even one that you can market, it's a safe environment to come in, come on down. But just my 2 cents.
All right, any other board members have any other questions on the license? All right, I don't see any more questions. I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the 2021 emergency outdoor entertainment license for Grafton Grill with the amended times of 12 to 8 Sunday through Wednesday and 12 to 9 Thursday through Saturday.
I have a motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? I guess one question, is there any way that we can update that for Mr. Belfiore with Viewpoint so that way it reflects the hours that we're approving tonight? Mr. Brassard, is that something that can be done?
Mr. Berger, do you want to take that? Can we update it in there?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
That was my only question. All right, is there any other questions from the board on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Mr. Belfiore, thank you very much for coming in tonight. We appreciate it. Good luck this year, and we hope your business does well. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for letting me take that out of order. Let's go back up. So tonight, I know the board has had some discussions about this past couple meetings and obviously just a few moments ago, but we wanted to bring in the key people who were part of the tent permitting process for Grafton. So tonight I have with us here Mr. McGoldrick, Chief Crapo, Mr. Berger, and Mr. Colleen here. So just to kind of rehash a few things, I know that there's this board has discussed a short-term what's going on in the short term with the emergency orders and being lifted to be able to dine and consume alcohol outside without going through the formal process. But then there's the other question that remains about going into hey, we're hearing discussions from some of the businesses about, what are the long-term impacts post-COVID and what does this look like and how is Grafton going to start addressing this in dealing with on things on a more permanent basis, especially around noise, safety, as we were discussing earlier. So I'm rehashing a little bit. I'm probably not giving it the amount of justice it deserves over the past few meetings that we've discussed, but I wanted to open this up to the board members who had some questions. We have the principals here with us tonight, so I'll open it up to anyone on the board who wants to go first. Ms. Roy.
So you guys heard some of the concerns we just had at that location, and I think they're going to be similar to a lot of the locations, which is what kind of safety mechanisms did we put into place? And I understand last year was kind of an anomaly. You guys were trying to come up with a plan really quick on the fly, but this year is a little different. We've had a year to think about it, a year to put more mechanisms in place and not really just repeat what we did last year because it worked. We want to improve on last year so this can be a long-term situation for some locations. So that's just my question is why there isn't a stronger safety mechanism put in place when there's active cars right next to people.
Does anyone want to?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Thank you.
So I called Boston and I asked Boston with outdoor seating, what is our prescribed method of safety? And because this pandemic, there is no procedure that we're supposed to follow. There is no yardstick that says if you have seating on a sidewalk, then you have to do this. So we really have no guidance from Boston on the building side. But I also want to address something that just happened a second ago. You have two restaurants that got special permits for outdoor seating for their tents. All right. And you have two different boards that approved them. You have the planning board for Sargons and you have the zoning board of appeals for Bridge Street. Those are two separate boards with two completely different members. So the way that they looked at the site plan was different for each board. And I don't know if either of them, looked into the safety aspect as deep as you would want them to. I think they were just looking at, you have a special permit for your seating on inside the restaurant. And now you're asking for to go outside on a temporary thing because of the pandemic. And I think it's great that these restaurants are being allowed to go outside, but for a permanent solution, because Peter, you did talk about, you wanted this, let's look at this long-term. Long-term, this is not going to be sustainable because, if you have a restaurant that has 150 seats inside and they only have parking for 150 seats inside, who is going to be policing how many people are inside and how many people are outside? I know we're living through this pandemic right now, but at the end of the day, this is going to stop and we're going to all come to a new normal. And the new normal is, I just knocked on wood that everybody's going to get vaccinated. This is going to stop and we're all going to enjoy each other's company inside. But for now, we're outside and I'm living with that as the zoning enforcement officer. But in a year or so, 2023, I'm thinking this is all going to go away and we're all going to have to move back inside. I know the people like being outside. They like the outdoor entertainment, but that's not what our zoning is allowing. And it's the parking that kind of kills everything. If there were fields, if this was High Point Golf Club and they weren't using, Green 9 and they wanted outdoor seating in Green 9, that's a different story. But here, every place that you're looking at is confined. It's confined with parking lots and building. And I think that's what I wanted to say tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Roy, did you have follow-up?
Yeah, so that still didn't really answer my question. What I heard was that you checked into Boston and there was no yards to measure by, which means that gives us the freedom in Grafton to come up with what we feel comfortable with. And while I understand last year it was just kind of slapped together, we've had a year now to come up with what do we feel comfortable with allowing people to do in these active parking lots. And I understand that it's not something that a Jersey barrier is not there to be designed there forever. Like we just heard, it comes and gets removed and replaced and moved around. So what's our temporary safety measures beyond, a potted plant or nothing?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Mr. Berger and then Mr. McGoldrick. Yep.
Okay. As the building inspector and as the fire inspector, and I don't want to speak to the fire inspector, so he should speak after the other person speaks. We look at what was approved through planning board or the zoning board. And they're the ones that do that site plan review. And if they look at it and say, okay, you're going to put planters there, great, we're going to look for planters. And we're going to make sure whatever is part of that modification of the special permit is in place before we give it the go-ahead. Because all we're doing is just reviewing a document that planning board or the zoning board pushes through, and we want to make sure that they met those requirements. So this is really on the planning board members to look at the safety, and the zoning board, when they do their job, to look at the safety of the entire site.
Mr. McGoldrick, did you want to speak as well?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to build off that a little bit. And I agree with Mr. Berger. Having seen the comments from the select board, I think the planning board, they did look at some of the concerns that they were looking at were mainly related to noise and to the parking, the capacity indoor and outdoor. And they did put the restrictions on that. And part of why it's the planning board and zoning board in certain cases is we wanted to tie it to a specific permit, so we had a little more teeth in terms of enforcement if there was an issue. I think there may be an opportunity, and I'm happy to look into it. I know we went for the shared winter spaces grant and received money for that for a separate project, so I don't want to say that there's any guarantee that we can get a next round, but that was also a grant specifically for this kind of infrastructure that we may be able to apply for on the town side to get funding for temporary planters or Jersey barriers. I know some of the restaurants are concerned about aesthetics of what those barriers will look like. But that gives us something to kind of leverage that. So it's a low cost or no cost to the businesses. And the town gets to keep those for, if we want to put them in a park at a later time or use them for other temporary projects, or we could fund it, a service, a pickup drop off similarly, but that's something I can look into.
Mr. Colleen, did you want to address Ms. Roy's question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So I know I'm pretty new here. And I've just gotten used to the town. When I was looking through at least the viewpoint system, all I can see is the plans that were submitted previously and the requirements for the fire side, which is just the flammability of the tents and so forth. But what I've tried to do is when they submitted a plan that was approved, that plan needs to match what they're actually doing. So if you take Reunion, for example, they had in their drawings a certain number of planters blocking basically the entrance from when cars were coming into the parking lot. They didn't close off their handicapped space, even though it was very close to the tent. But if you look at the way the parking lot is set up, it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal with a car coming from the opposite direction. So that for Reunion seemed feasible that they blocked it off from the main road right there. When you come to Grafton Grill, for example, I had gone down there and there's a guardrail all the way down to where the tent is from the main road. And when you enter to the right of those handicap spots that he was showing, there are 2 planters on the right-hand side that are protection from any cars. So I know that he had said that there was nothing there, but I can tell you from walking down there, there are 2 planters there from when they come in. There is no, I can't really say there's no rhyme or reason, but there's no specific structure that I've seen for directions to really give everyone in town to say you need to have a Jersey barrier, you need to have this much gallonage of water in a planter, you need to have this much sand, in order to protect. So I've kind of myself tried to go out and really kind of help them, have something that obviously is structurally sound, that if, goodness forbid, that if a car does come up over or into that area, that they are somewhat protected. But I didn't get any guidance from what I've seen as far as, what exactly the town itself was looking for protection. So I've just taken the plans that were given to me and had them meet those or make them change them. For example, next to the station is Wong's, and they submitted a wooden fence. Now, per a memorandum on June 25th, 2020, from the state, they gave a guidance for safety considerations for outdoor dining. Now, it's just a guidance. The town has to decide what they want to do, but that restaurant itself has just a wooden fence. So I went to speak with them, and I said, you need to have some sort of protection because that road is zoned at 40 miles per hour. That and people speed down there a little bit, that it could be a dangerous situation. So I explained to them that the wooden fence was not feasible enough and that it doesn't allow the secondary means of egress, even with that fact that the guidance says they should be 50% open. That being said, another one was Cancun's, which was the only one that on the main road had a tent behind a curb. So the concrete stops, if you will, for vehicles that they put in the parking spaces were mostly already there, and an actual curb with the bottom of telephone poles were planted in pavement. So that offers more of a safety consideration. But as you can tell, all of these restaurants have a different arrangement. And because it's in a lined parking lot, I agree that they're going to have some sort of safety barrier from any cars that are coming in, because they're coming into a parking lot. And you can't just get rid of the handicap parking spaces unless you move them somewhere else. But that's a whole change of everything. So I'm solely, on my part, looking at what they submit for a plan and saying, if that seems that seems like there's nothing in place or there's something extremely life-threatening about it, then I will talk to them and via phone or face-to-face or whatever and say, you need to change this because you're endangering patrons. And I agree that, the safety of people in the long run is at the forefront of what we're trying to do.
Ms. Roy.
So I guess this question is to maybe Evan or everybody. It sounds like the reason there isn't anything more substantial in place is because no one had any guidance or anywhere to look to say, I need to do this. So what do we as a town have to put in place so that everybody has something to refer to say, if you're going to be putting this up for longer than a one-day situation, this is what we are going to require you to have for safety?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Berger.
So when they were in front of these particular boards, my question to your board is, did you get notice and did you comment on it? You didn't get notice, Evan or this board, for comment on those 2 special permits?
No,
not that
I don't believe so.
Okay, so then I think that could be a step that needs to happen. So when they go in front of any particular board for these outdoor tents or outdoor entertainment, then the select board should be able to give their input before a permit is issued or permission is issued. I think that could have solved a lot of these problems. And I do agree with the parking, but I don't really think that it's going in the parking lot that's the danger. I think it's people that get in their car and hit the gas instead of the brake when they're backing out of their space. I think that's where your danger is.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah, Bob, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I feel like, I'm sorry, I feel like we got this wrong. I feel like we put the cart before the horse. This was a conversation we should have had 3 weeks ago. We may not have been put on notice from the particular boards about the special permit, but again, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. We're talking about an entertainment license that comes before this board. And under the statute, we are empowered to talk about safety and consider safety protocol and consider the ramifications of something that goes wrong when we're issuing this license. And what happened here was we all thought that those boards were considering safety. And those boards all said, well, we don't have any guidance to tell us that we should be doing anything differently than talking about the plans. It was just the perfect example of the thought process breaking down when government is designed to do like one thing that we're used to, one predictable thing that we're used to. And here, where we're trying to do something kind of new, everybody else assumes that somebody else is responsible for the thing. And nobody's really willing to say, no, I'm going to step out of my box a little bit here and ask these hard questions. And now, okay, we're having this conversation, but the two of them are gone. We've let these things go down the road. And now we're sort of in a position where we've got to hope that nothing happens between now and November. Unless someone's going to tell me that, no, we can reconsider, which I don't think we can. And I think the conversation I want to have, and Boston's all well and good, but Boston's a different situation. And I've thought a lot about this. There's been a lot of open air dining around in cities where there are busy streets. Take Moody Street in Waltham, where there are chairs on the sidewalks now. There's nothing but a curb cut there to protect the vehicle hopping the road. But that's the best you can do. You can't shut down a sidewalk entirely. Here, where we can do something, where a rural community, people aren't walking from place to place to get into a restaurant. They're driving there, they're parking there, they're drinking there, and then they're driving away. The thing to do is to consider, okay, what burden are we going to place on these establishments for the benefit of allowing them to increase their, well, not increase their capacity, but maintain their capacity through open air dining. And I don't think it would have been too much to say there has to be some crash rated barrier there. And I know that Reunion has planters. I don't know that they're crash rated. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. And the threat that we're talking about, or the potential problem we're talking about at the grill, isn't someone busting through the barrier on that street. It really is someone getting in the car in one of those spaces and backing into the tent just because you hit the gas a little too hard and you took your foot off the brake a half a second too soon. I don't know what to say other than chalk this up to lesson learned. And if this does go any further than this, Bob, you're absolutely right. You have open air dining because you're trying to increase the safe capacity during COVID. There are a certain amount of parking spots associated with the capacity here. And I don't see this as being something that really is going to be all that manageable going forward unless we're considering dramatic changes to the use of the property and considering allowing people a percentage less parking for the capacity. There's going to be parking in neighborhoods, parking in some side streets. And is that something that people are willing to tolerate so that people can eat outside? I don't know. I guess it's a conversation for another day, but I wish this one had been something that we talked about before we issued the first one. That's all.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Chief Crapo?
Yeah, when this came about last year, the police department main function in this, our concern naturally where alcohol is being served would be what's allowed off premises. Now they passed that. I still don't get the reasoning, but they're allowing people to take alcohol with them off the premises. And that's our main concern. When this came about, we did some inspections. I did some inspections after the fact. The tents were already up and I came out. So, we did our best to take a look at this. And once again, building looked at it, zoning looked at it. And, the only thing you could possibly do right now is maybe affect the traffic flow around these tents. There's establishment has its own little unique issue. Reunion, Cancun's, Post Office, Pub 122, Grafton Grill, and Hunters. So I don't know what you can do going forward. Like you said, you've already approved 2 of these establishments, so I don't know what you can do with the otherwise. But you have to remember too, if somebody, what if? CVS has been entered by a vehicle at least 3 times since I've been here. Somebody hit the gas and went through the building, or at least crashed into the building. We had the same situation at the Mart on Worcester Street. Went right through the building. It was an elderly gentleman. So you're never going to stop that, and unless you put a wall up around these tents, you're not going to stop it. You can mitigate it, you can slow them down, but it is, I think, the owners should be. I'm sure they talk to their insurance companies to find out what processes they had to do to make it safe. There's nobody, as Mr. Prisby said, they don't want to get sued. That's the last thing they want to do. So, but right now, I think what we can do is possibly look at a way to mitigate the situation by directing traffic around. I was looking at Reunion. They have basically 3 driveway cuts. One that can go right to the back. The other, they can eliminate the 3 spots and just keep the traffic channel going down towards the back and then coming out the front. Pub 122, that's an open lot. The post office is tucked away in the back. What they can do there, I think, and a few of these establishments can do, and actually use employee vehicles to block the siding, rather than having to, go out and force them to buy Jersey barriers. Have the employees park there. They're going to lose some spots. The only issue is, like Grafton Grill, you have your handicap parking on that side where they want the tent. I don't know what it would take. I know for handicap parking, you need to put basically a ramp. It's got to be lined. It's got to be striped. It's got to be properly signed. You can't just slap a sign up saying handicap parking and that's it to move that. So that's issues, once again, building and zoning would have to deal with if they can get special permission to do that. So just, and as far as Hunter's Grill, I don't know how much room left they have left with that tent in the parking lot, and they have vehicle traffic coming in on all sides. So once again, is it a way, rather than force them to put down heavy duty planters or bollards or barricades, maybe use employee vehicles to surround the tent to kind of mitigate any issues there. I mean, a bollard or like you said, a plastic water barricade or whatever. If somebody comes in a high rate of speed, I don't care if it's a building and they come at a high rate of speed, it's, tragedy is going to happen. No 2 ways about that. But I think with channeling, proper lighting and all that, we can kind of mitigate that. It's not perfect, but this isn't perfect either. Like I said before, alcohol being served off premises so they can help, let the restaurants make some money, might be good for the economy. Police departments aren't crazy about it, though. I can tell you right now. So there's no perfect solution to this.
Thanks, Chief. Anyone have any questions, comments? Ms. Roy.
So I understand that outdoor seating has been approved for most of these locations, and outdoor entertainment has now been approved for 2 of these locations. And we wish we could have done something better, but we didn't. Is there anything we can do for this year that requires an additional safety permit for them to come get, where now we're looking at it with the eyes of safety involved that just clearly didn't happen before right now, and say, hey, listen, your outdoor dining looks great for dining, but we didn't talk about safety. So we need to do a safety permit this year. And next year that'll be incorporated in the outdoor dining if next year comes around. But is there any way to put in a safety permit mechanism at this point and have them come back and just get another permit?
Mr. McGoldrick?
I think rather than an additional permit, what I might suggest is that at our next development team meeting, me, Chief Crapo, Fire and Building, and maybe Evan too, can kind of sit down, look at each of the locations, and kind of try to develop a little bit of a plan of what specific adjustments we would like to see in terms of kind of the vehicular safety. And then to be a little bit more business friendly, we can approach them either through John or through the permit for the outdoor seating, and just approach them and say, hey, is there a way to make this work? In the meantime, I'll look into the shared spaces to see if that's another kind of negotiating chip that we can throw in the ring there to really come to a solution together. If we need to do an additional permit after that to get compliance, that would still, I guess, be an option. But I just wanted to mention that the planning board did, in issuing these licenses, mention that given the trends in COVID right now, that they're not anticipating issuing these for next year. That it would need to be a full modification through the regular process rather than a temporary permit.
Mr. Berger?
So the only thing I can say is, if I was gonna deny something, I would have to give them a chapter and an article on why I deny it, so they can go in front of the appeals board and appeal it. And there's nothing in the building code that will let me deny that tent permit. But what I don't know if we can do is pull everybody back in front of their particular board, like the planning board, and reissue a new condition based on this new information. I think that's the only way to get these establishments to put in the safety measures that you're looking for. I don't know if you can legally do that or not, but I think that's the only avenue that you have, because there is no permit that we can give them. But we can say, we need to modify your special permit issued by the planning board and the zoning board. And again, I don't know if you can even do that because it was issued.
I would say, Mr. Clean.
Everybody raised their hands.
I know, I almost have to flip a coin here or something. But we go with Mr. Clean.
I just wanted to say, like Mr. Berger had said, a lot of what we do relies on a code as well. And with the outdoor dining, like I had mentioned, that memorandum, there's no code as what the state requires for an actual barrier. So it's tough to enforce that as I went around, unless the town adopted something and put together some sort of requirements. But like I said, there was no actual code for myself to enforce that.
And we'll go to Mr. Often, Mr. Brassard, and I think, Mr. Fazio, did you have your hand up too? Thank you. Going that order.
Thanks. I strongly support Mr. McGoldrick's development team approach. I think, that getting some of the key stakeholders together to work with the businesses and see if we can potentially provide a little bit of funding to help make some of these modifications and make these locations as safe as they possibly can, given the unique circumstances that each one of them presents, is something I'd be in full support of.
Yeah, so Mr. Offen said almost exactly what I was thinking. But what I do want to say is I think this is a good example of what we need to try to avoid in local government, right? So and I don't want this to come across as insulting, but you, the board, are the agenda setters, the policy makers, as is the planning board, as is the zoning board. And the people that you've invited here are, and again, not to be insulting, but they're the enforcers of that policy. So should we all collectively be raising the alarm if we think that this probably could be done better or safer? Absolutely. But I think we need to do a better job, and this is on us bureaucrats, to bring some of this up to the elected officials and say, hey, here's a red flag. You need to look at this as far as policy agenda setting and send us in the direction that you want us to go, and we will do that. So I think there's two different levels, right? There's the top down, and then there's the bottom up, and we need to make sure that we're sending communication in both of those directions to make sure that we're doing what you want. Because as Mr. Colleen and Mr. Berger said, and the chief, we as bureaucrats live in the black and white of this is what the code says and this is what the code doesn't say. And so to enforce that, they need to have something that's enforceable. And I think it's just a matter of working together to catch this stuff early, and make sure that we do this the right way. I will say I do think that Mr. McGoldrick's suggestion is the way to go at this point. I don't know that pulling people back in for another permit or bring them before a board for another meeting is necessarily going to yield the result that you want. I think that if we as staff can kind of come up with some of our best case, stop gaps here and can work with the local business owners to try to assist them to make those changes, I think that's probably going to yield you the best results. Personally. Thank you.
Mr. Fazio?
Thanks. I'll be brief because Mr. Often and Mr. Brassard said very similar things to what I was going to mention too. But I just wanted to thank you all for coming in tonight too, because I think it's been really helpful to have you here and get a better understanding of how we got to this point in the first place. And it seems to me that I now have a better understanding that it's a case-by-case basis too, based on the location, based on the parking situation. And one of my concerns, even though safety is my first concern, was I was worried about the cost for the small businesses of, having to put any sort of barriers up. So again, as it's been mentioned a few times, I think that grant that Mr. McGoldrick mentioned would be a great idea. And one thing we don't have, because we took Grafton Grill first, is we don't have representation right now of any of these restaurant owners. And I'd like to believe that they want safety for their patrons, and that if they were able to get a grant for doing that, that they would take the barriers. So if this committee looked at, let's say, I'm going to use this as an example, Grafton Grill, that seems to be a huge worry to people backing up from handicap spots so close to a tent. Perhaps that's something that we can approach the owners again and say, we're able to get you barriers to help with safety. Would you be interested in this? And I can't imagine the answer would be no. So that's really all I have to add. Thank you.
Any other questions or comment from the board? Mr. Prisby.
So my time on this board is winding down, and this discussion is sort of running its course. But I just want to say this one thing about, when we talk about the cost benefit analysis of safety. The way I look at it is you look at something that's foreseeable and you see what you can prevent. No, we are not trying to provide the safest environment possible for people. You can never do that. As the chief said, you can crash through a wall. CVS, it's happened a couple times. But what you want to do is mitigate risk where it's reasonable. And I would encourage everybody to view this problem in the reverse from the foreseeable worst case scenario, which is someone getting hit. And what would you say to the general public? Headline, Madison Prisby, 12 of Grafton, killed at restaurant on Sunday while dining with parents. When asked why there weren't additional safety precautions installed at the restaurant for outdoor dining in the parking lot, the select board members said, well, we thought the $450 was too much of a burden to bear on the business. That's absurd. You would never say that to people after the fact. So why would that be a rationale while you're considering this? So we all have to be reasonable. We all want to be pro-business, but we've outlined a safety concern here. My opinion is we did it wrong. I hope we get it better in the future. That's up to you guys. I've got 18 more days on this. But I really do hope that in the future, we all kind of understand our roles here. And I think Evan said it exactly right. Bob and Michael and Chief, there are things that you guys know that we don't know and that we won't consider. We understand the broader policy implications, and I hope in the future the board and the department heads can work better together and communicate. And these are going to be challenges that we haven't foreseen coming up with potential business development in town generally. So I hope that we get it better in the future and just work together better. I'm sorry.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Kleen.
Would the board or town administrator like me to go around and try and discuss with the business owner to have their employees for the current time before, in the interim of us, discussing the Jersey barrier with the businesses, have their employees park their cars in those spaces to protect as much as we can?
Mr. Kleen, I think that personally, that's a great idea. I'm sure the rest of them seen nodding of heads.
Yep.
Please bring that up with your, within the development meeting. Okay. That way it's communicated effectively across, all the departments here. I wanted to, yeah, I think so. Unless anyone else, board member, have any comments on that. I wanted to say something, and Ed, this is going to go along with your thinking too on this, and you're right. We needed to have this conversation last fall, right? We needed to plan for April when we knew that this was something that was going to come down the pike. But I will tell you this, God forbid, Mr. Prisby's worst nightmare happens. Don't think for 1 minute that we're not going to be bringing all these businesses back in here after the fact too. So I would strongly encourage that the businesses work with the town and the town officials work with these businesses to prevent this in any way possible, even more so than potentially what they're doing today. That's my only thoughts on that. I think I agree with pretty much what everyone is saying here tonight. And I would encourage you all to work this out and have a cordial discussion with them. And I would be interested in what the feedback is. I don't know how the rest of the board feel, but it would be great if we could get that circulated back to us about how the conversations and the development's going. All right, is there anybody else on the board? I know I don't want to be the last person to speak, but does anyone else have any other question? Well, I want to thank Mr. Kleen, Mr. Goldrick, Chief Crapo, Mr. Berger. Thank you very much for coming in tonight and addressing our concerns. We appreciate it, your insight, and look forward to seeing how we can work to assure better, effective safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, I want to ask the board indulge me and postpone the Economic Development Committee charge. In speaking with Mr. Brassard, I still believe that there's some more work that needs to be done for us to have a conversation about the charge. With your broad permission, I'd like to bring this to the workshop next week. That way we can review it, and then we can bring it to our meeting on the 18th for consideration and ratification on that charge. Is there any objections to the board on that tonight? All right, thank you. All right, moving up to the 2021 special and annual spring. Oh, Mr. Fazio.
Yeah, just a quick question on that. Are we going to invite John Allen to the workshop as well? Just because my understanding is that he's going to have some input on the charge as well, or is this just going to be a board discussion?
We hadn't discussed that. It's something I think we can incorporate. I'll be honest with you, I believe myself and Mr. Brassard, we didn't discuss that, but we can definitely invite Mr. Allen in for the workshop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have the 2021 special and annual spring town meeting warrants tonight. I know there was an update that was sent late today, just fixing some, formatting issues with the both the special and annual town meeting warrants. But Mr. Brassard, do you want us to bring us through this?
Sure. Do you want me to share them out?
I've got them here. I can share out. I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay. Nope. Whichever way you'd like to do it is fine.
Actually, does the board wish to share these out? Do we need to look at them? I mean, what's the pleasure?
Sharing it would be nice for the people playing along at home.
Okay. Let me pull that up. So we're going to pull up the special town meeting warrant first. Okay. Everyone see that?
All right. So this is the cover. No, I'm just kidding. So You'll see here, the special, if people aren't familiar with the special, I'll just give you a real brief, why is there a special and why is there an annual? So the special takes care of business that needs to be accounted for in this current fiscal year, and the annual is for business that takes place in the following fiscal year. So what you'll see is Article 1 is to transfer and appropriate, it says a sum of money because all of that gets worked out as we vet out for your final warrant that gets posted right before the town meeting. And this is all the transfers that will happen inside the general operating budget to make us whole and not run deficit for year to year. Then the Article 2 is to pay a bill from a prior fiscal year that just came in after July 1. So we're not able to pay that legally. Fun fact, it's one of my favorite things about Massachusetts government is that to approve a bill from a prior fiscal year on a special, it's a 9/10 vote, which is just absurd, you know? Okay, so Article 3 is to see if the town will transfer it for the permanent personnel wages account to the expense account. And that's from rec, so that's just them moving some money. And Article 4 is a CPC article that is the transfer from CPA affordable housing to the housing trust. So that's just a shifting money over there. All right, so this is to allow us to be able to grant employees to be able to roll over their time that they weren't able to take during the pandemic. And then, so I don't want to bore everybody with the minutia, but it's mostly to either pay for things we didn't budget for because they were unforeseen, or to transfer money from one account to another. I'm happy to address any of the specific things. If anyone has any specific questions, but I don't know that it's necessary for me to go line by line on a special and bore everybody if they're happy. I'm happy to do it either way. I guess we didn't really discuss that prior to. But the special is really the least sexy part of the whole thing.
All right. Any of the board members have any questions on it? I can flip to the next page. And there's our signatures.
Yeah, so it is pretty short. And that was what we designed it to be. We try to keep the special as short as possible. As you know, you get about 30 minutes for the special before we want to try to be hitting the annual.
Okay. Any of the board members have any questions on the special town meeting warrant? Do you want to go and look at the annual town meeting and then we can do this all together, or do you want to do an individual motion? I can entertain one right now for the special.
I move the board vote to sign the June 5th, 2021 special town meeting warrant as presented.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion on signing the special town meeting warrant? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby?
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. All right, so next up, we have the annual. Let me just pull that up. All right. And
So one thing I'll point out is this year we have a glossary at the beginning. And that's simply because we use a lot of, legal shorthand or jargon that people might not be aware of what that means. And so this was actually Williams. William did all the work on both of these, to be quite frank. I offered some guidance and we met weekly, but this is really, William's baby. And so he thought that this was a good idea, and I agree. Thank you.
thank you, William.
So, your first set of articles here, we've included into a consent agenda. I believe last year was the first time you did a consent agenda. It's a tool that I've used in the past that I think is great at getting us past kind of those really, the basic principles of government that no one's going to vote no. And if you did, there are consequences to that inhibit your ability to run government. Keep in mind that anything you do on consent, all it takes is for a resident to yell out hold. We take that out of order and address it separately afterwards. So, Mr. Chairman, if you would scroll past the consent agenda and we can look at, if you want to keep, these are all your okay. So, Article 12 is the first one that's outside of the consent agenda, which is going to be your omnibus, right? And so what we'll be doing this year is the omnibus will be attached once it goes through the recommendation process from FinCom. It gets attached as attachment A so that the public will have the complete omnibus budget. It'll also be displayed on the PowerPoint. But one of the things that I saw that I wasn't particularly jazzed about is that a lot of our certifications for town meeting, they just say on screen. And I truly believe that they should be, anything you're going to put on the screen that has a legal ramification needs to be in the warrant. Can we go to the next page? Your next two articles, 13 and 14, these deal with replacing a fire truck, engine 1. So the first article authorizes you to borrow the money, which is either going to be by lease or bond. And then Article 14 is where you're actually appropriating said money that you borrowed to actually pay for the truck and all the other CIPC recommended purchases, which total $1,281,000. And that breakdown is $781 from free cash and $500,000 from the capital stabilization fund. So then we can move down to Article 16, which is where you appropriate your money for Blackstone Valley. And then the second one is Article 16 is the debt that BVT has incurred that we're paying towards. So for those, again, who are not that familiar with town meeting, you have to, if you're going to borrow money, you have to do this, and it's a two-part process. So you have to ask to be able to borrow the money, and then you have to take that money and appropriate it towards whatever. And you really should not be mixing those two together into one place. We have the unemployment compensation account. That's a pretty standard article. That is, if we have anybody that we've laid off that we need to plan for their unemployment, we would put that into that line there. We are looking to sell a parcel of land located at 127 Westboro Road. I believe this predates me, but it is a small sliver of land that the town owns that we're going to sell to the abutter. Article 19 funds Grafton oversight, or the Grafton GCTV. There we go. Go to the next one, please. All right. Same thing with Article 20. That is the paying of debt for GCTV. We have to accept a hydrant, which is new to me. I've never seen that done this way before. Then we're going to just do some moving of money for the sewer commission. Again, just kind of your day-to-day operation stuff, and to move money from retained earnings to pay for other things. Inflow and infiltration inspection, in case people don't know, is where you send a camera down the sewer and look for leaks that you may have, or roots that may be invading into the sewer. You can go to the next page, Mr. Chairman. Article 26 is something that we looked at. This allows us to extend contracts beyond what general procurement law allows. This is an option under the law, but allows us to do contracts which go beyond 3 years, but no more than 10 years. And so the times in which you may want to do that is when you're looking at either a service that you don't necessarily want to be flip-flopping every 3 years with a bid, or something that you may be able to get a really good long-term deal for and protect yourself from market fluctuations. And that's really what that's designed to do. I don't think that we would give a 10-year contract very often, if ever, but that's what the statute has us adopt. So you've got your principal payments for the Pell property, Pell Farm property, that's a CPC. And then you've got a whole bunch of other CPC articles here that are either paying debt, providing a new project. And I believe if we go farther down, Mr. Chairman, we start getting into extension of sunset provisions. So basically what they're doing is, because of COVID, projects got delayed. Those projects in the warrant had expiration dates, and they're looking to just extend those projects that have already been approved so that they're able to actually complete them, which I think is pretty straightforward. We can go to the next page, Mr. Chairman. The next is making changes to our, which is our, excuse me, Article 35. This is making changes to our stormwater bylaw that makes it more in line with the MS4 permitting process that's done by the federal government. So we have some revisions that need to be done to the bylaw to make sure that we're in compliance with MS4. Now we can go to the next page. And yeah, we can keep going. All right. So this is 46 Adams Road. We're transferring from the select board to the Conservation Commission. That's Article 36. Article 37 is to see if the town will vote to accept the donation of real property known and numbered as 4 Millennial Drive, which is in our development park that's over in that area. And it's owned by Worcester Business Development Council. And so we would put it into open space. It's basically unusable land for the business in that area, and it has some conservation value. The next articles, which are 38, 39, and 38 and 39, are both from the assessor's office, and they both ask the town to accept provisions of Chapter 59. They are different sections, but they basically allow exemptions for people that are in the National Guard, or what is the other one is their surviving spouses, and certain blind persons, veterans, surviving spouses, and seniors. So it's basically giving the assessor's office the ability to give exemptions to folks that meet these criteria. Personally, I'm all for it. I think that there's some really great benefit to having those exemptions, and generally speaking, they do not add up to large losses in your tax base. I mean, they're really small, but they can have a big impact in people's lives. The next one is Article 40. This is the marijuana increase, license increase that we've discussed and met with EDC on. If you want to scroll further. So this Article 41 is an error on the town's part, where we did not include the number 17. We only did 27 Upton Street, and our RFP was 17 and 27. So this corrects that issue. Article 42, 43, and 44 are citizens petitions, which seek to change either the name of holidays or by adding Juneteenth to the the town personnel bylaw, which we discussed, I believe, at the last meeting. And then Article 48 is to convey 25 Worcester Street, Grafton, to the town, so to the select board for consideration for the purpose of open space. And that is also a citizen petition. And that is all she wrote on the annual town meeting warrant.
Any questions on the board? Mr. Opton and Mr. Frisbee?
I'm going to let Mr. Frisbee go first.
Mr. Frisbee?
Ooh, call on me. Yeah, Article 45. How would we convey a property that we no longer own?
I believe that that's, I will have a letter from council, but I believe that we will likely be looking to, I think the town will likely have to pass over that, but we're vetting that out currently. Because I'm in agreement. I believe that once the board voted and the town meeting voted to transfer ownership of that property and was deeded to the trust, that it then becomes the care and custody of the trust and cannot be moved back to the town via a town meeting vote.
Well, so just to be more precise than that, once it's recorded
Yes.
at the registry of deeds. I mean,
Yes, yes,
we
thank
could
you.
have- You know, you could no more convey 25 Worcester Street at this point than you could convey my house. You simply don't own it, you know, by deed.
I believe that'll be the outcome, but I am going to have council draft a opinion memo on that as well.
Mr. Alston?
That was the question that I needed answered.
Great. Ms. Roy?
I have a question on Article 41. Since we're going back and correcting the RFP, I was looking at that and it also includes 23 Upton on the RFP. So do we have to have any wording removing that at all?
I seem to think it is
Yeah.
23 Upton Street. I think that might be a typo in the warrant, right?
In this warrant? I'm sorry, I'm confused. So, Ms. Roy, is the 23 listed in the RFP?
Yes. So if you pulled up the RFP
Okay.
for Upton Street, it's going to say, that, the town invites commercial real estate, but the main bold part is redevelopment of the former DPW garage, 27 Upton, and Wood Barn, 23 Upton, is mixed-use development and disposition of property located at 17 and 23 Upton Street. So I didn't think 23 Upton Street was correct at all. And we left off 17 last time, and we didn't even include 27 correctly. So the RFP is just royally screwed up. If we're going back to fix it here, do we want to make sure we're fixing it all the way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will spend some time with the development team and that RFP and make sure that we jive.
If I may, with the board's permission, I want to share another screen real quick. Mr. Brassard, I just want to share this with you. Maybe this would get this cleared up. But this is the property here at, and it's listed as 17 Upton Street on the assessor's record.
Right.
Can we check with them and just make sure we've got anything that they have on the record for this property, just to
Yes.
Miss Roy's point? Okay, thank you.
And that
Yeah, we
little
will-
square down there is part of it too, where it's that 27 over where it says like 84. If you click that square, Peter, that's the 27 part of it.
Yeah.
That one. Yep.
It's two parcels, right?
Okay,
So
see.
those are the parts that are going. 23 is not part of it at all, but the current RFP includes 23.
Yes, I will double check that. Yes, I will I will figure that out.
Okay, yep, all right.
One way or the other, I will figure it out.
Did anyone else have any other questions?
Make
Mr.
it,
Frisbee?
make it go.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just, Ray Mead has his hand up in the participants thing.
Board have any objections to Mr. Meaden? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mead. Can you hear us?
Good evening, Peter. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Article 45, I'm just gonna, what Ed said about, and Evan said about Article 45. Article 45 should be and will be ruled out by the moderator, ruled out of order by the moderator. So there's no need to go into a passover because it's not a valid warrant article. So it's just gonna be ruled out of order. That was it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mead. All right, does the board members have any other questions? We all know Mr. Mead, he's all things town moderator for 20 years, right? So, all right, any other questions on the board? On the annual town meeting warrant? Nothing? Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to sign the June 5th, 2021 annual town meeting warrant as presented.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the warrant? Sorry, I didn't see hands. I'm sorry, Ms. Roy? Yep.
If Evan does look into Article 41 and we do have to reword that, do we have to revote on it at that time, or would that just be included in this
What-
vote?
No, what I would do is you're going to vote it as presented. If there was something that needed to change, then I would, or actually probably a resident would offer a amendment to that article.
Okay.
On the floor. I believe that the article is now correct and the RFP is now incorrect.
Right.
That being said, I've been wrong before, and if we need to, we'll make sure we amend it.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Okay, seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before you move, I just want to circle back and I'd like to point out or say again, thank William for all of his hard work on this. That was a lot of work. He came to me and asked if he could spearhead it because he's really interested in it. And I can't imagine why, but he took it and ran with it. I think he did a great job. And so thank you, William.
Thank you, William.
Thank you, William.
Thank you, William.
It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
I really like the glossary. That's a good addition.
Thank
Agreed.
you. I think that that'll be very useful.
I'm also really glad that we stuck with the consent agenda. That was something that was opportunistic for, the Springtown meeting, and it's really nice to see it all carried through. It's great.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. All right, next up, we have resignation, Board of Registrar of Voters. If there's any questions, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Donna Gerard from the Board of Registrars of Voters effective immediately and send her a letter of thanks.
Second.
Motion made in second. Any discussion on the motion of resignation? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. And thank you, Donna, for all your years of service. Truly appreciate it. Next up, we have resignation for election worker.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Marion Deaning as an election worker and to send her a letter of thanks.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Okay, next up, we already just went over, we don't have any appointments for select board or town administrator. We've already covered new business, outdoor entertainment license. Next up here on our agenda is a select board annual reappointment policy. So we brought this back forward based on our workshop about the board addressing its current policy and revising it. I want to let Mr. Brassard, if you want to just kind of kick this off and maybe just give a quick overview over the proposed policy, and we can open it up for the board for any discussions or any questions or comments. You are muted, sir.
Sorry, I am slightly unprepared and I'm pulling it up.
I can share my screen.
I have it. Either way, whatever you prefer to do. Do you want me to share my screen?
Board, would you want to share the screen? Sure.
No, actually, I'm having trouble.
I got it.
Thank you. I'm having trouble getting into the server now all of a sudden.
Got it.
Okay, so I'd like to take a tremendous amount of credit for this policy, but it is basically Westboro's policy that we have pirated, which is the in my opinion, the mark of any good town administrator and stealing from your neighbors. Mr. Often had sent this over to me and said that he liked the general gist of it, and I agree. So essentially what we're at is if it's a new appointment, you're going to post it for 2 weeks in the Grafton News and on the town website. We should probably also add our Facebook page to that because I think we've got a pretty decent reach with that as well. And you're going to tell people what the general duties of that board and committee are. Then people will submit letters of interest to the select board / TA's office. We will then send them out to you folks, and then also to the chair of the board, which somebody is applying to. They will then give back review and screening. We probably would want to consider on number 3, possibly having that say review, screening, and recommendation, because I'm assuming you'd want that board's chairman to give some feedback, or the board that board in general. You'll then interview the candidates in open meeting, and you can also take public comment on that, right? So members of the applicable board or committee, the public, and any other select board wishes to include may attend interviews and ask questions as permitted by the chair. We want to go to the next page. Thank you. So you'll make your decision. I mean, and then you'll be sent a letter if they're not chosen, which I think is important. It doesn't have to spell out anything dramatic, but just thanks for your interest. Please, please apply for something else. Maybe there'll be room there for you. Try to, engage the public as much as possible. And then it gives an exemption for, depending on the nature of the committee or the petition, it gives you some wiggle room if the board so chooses to, kind of make a decision on the fly as far as urgency or, something like. It gives an example of the Hurricane Katrina committee, right? So if you were doing a committee like that, you'd want it to respond fairly quickly for whatever you're trying to do. And you might not want to post it for 2 weeks and then have whatever their, fundraising arm is trying to do be irrelevant at that point, right? So it gives you some flexibilities. Then you go into the reappointment, which is, I think, kind of what we talked most about the last meeting. And so basically when your term is expiring, we'll send you a notice that says that you need to respond, whether or not they have interest in being reappointed. Then you can then either elect to reappoint a member of the committee with an expiring term, or request that the member reapply for appointment, depending on, whatever factors you want to consider, and then interview that person in an open meeting for the position. And then number 3 basically just outlines what that's going to look like. And I'll just read it briefly because I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but approximately 30 days before the expiration date of a term, on any board or committee, the select board shall publicly solicit from residents, including the current members of such a board or committee, any questions, comments, or other relevant feedback regarding the charge, procedures, and activities of such board or committee, as well as the informal expressions of interest in serving on such a board or committee, either currently or in the near future. Such solicitations should mention that any written or emailed response should be accompanied by the name and not anonymous, and may be subject to disclosure to open records law. Responses to such solicitations may be used by the select board at their discretion in considering whether or not to appoint somebody to said committee. Such responses may also be used by the select board in their discretion in considering whether to potentially revise the membership scope or charge or duties of a board or committee. That's kind of the gist of it. I think that might be the second time I use the word gist tonight, which is not a normal word for me. That's new. So what I did was I took feedback from the board and tried to shoehorn it into this pre-existing policy, because I think the policy as it sat was pretty good. I know I had a conversation with Colleen about something that she had thought we might want to consider, and I don't know if Colleen wants to raise that.
Yeah,
now.
so one of the things I was thinking about is when we're coming down to reappointment, some boards and committees have seats on them from other boards and committees. They have representatives, and how can we limit over representation in some committees? And I can use CIPC as an example. There's 2 selectmen on that board, and if we wanted, we could probably be cherry picking capital projects to push through and things of that nature. Or look at CPC, for example. They have multiple members on their committee that have ties to the historical district. So if they wanted to push through historical projects, things of that nature. How do we prevent overrepresentation and try to make it so that it's as fair as possible?
Mr. Prisby.
Okay, that's an awesome question. I feel like there are two ways you can do that. Number one, periodic review of charges, and then number two, have that be something that you take into consideration when you're doing reappointments or appointments to begin with. Otherwise, you would need some sort of either policy or bylaw that I'm not even sure how you would draft that, because there are so many overlapping committees that we have going on. And as we've noted before, it tends to be the same 100 people all the time. So I think that would be the sort of thing that you would probably take on a case-by-case basis and let that be a factor in determining appointments or reappointments. That's just my take off the top of my head.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, so I'd agree with that. I mean, it has to be a consideration, but I think it is on a case-by-case basis. So I wouldn't necessarily think that has to be a hard requirement in a policy, but it definitely would be a consideration. And I think it depends on the nature of the board or committee, what their charge is, and what their respective representation is at the time of either appointment or reappointment. One question that I had is there's a couple of places where it mentions recommended candidates, and I think I would ask the board to think about maybe using the term interested candidates versus recommended. I would like to, whether they're recommended or not, be open to, interviewing and potentially appointing anybody who's interested, who's expressed that letter and taken a step forth to volunteer for the position.
So, Mr. Hoffman, you're talking about reappointments on number 2 on that that last sentence. Well, the last line.
Yep, and there's also one up in the appointment piece as well. So first of all, we don't really have a process for recommendations yet. I would like input from other, from the boards. We ran into that sort of with the Board of Health. I'd like their input, as part of our process for, figuring out who we want to appoint or reappoint, for sure. But since we don't really have a real process for that, I think we should just use the word interested. And then we can sort of define the recommendation process as a separate matter.
Okay. Mr. Fazio and then Mr. Prisby.
I'm not sure how many committees are like this, but I know there are some that have seats with no expiration. So I just want to make sure that we also do the internal job of taking a look at those committees that have had people sitting on them for years, and they're just seats that we never review. And I think we should take a look at those too and make sure that all committees are following the same policy.
Mr. Prisby and then Ms. Roy.
So kind of along those lines, one of my concerns with this and seeing this happen year after year is that there are people who, regardless of whether or not there is a term on their position, tend to be on these things for a long, long time. And largely it's because, nobody wants to ask someone to go, but at the same time, part of me thinks that the number of years being on these things at some point begins to become a factor on a couple of different levels. People get set in their ways. You get a little bit of pride of authorship in what you've done over the years. Committees get cliquey. There become, sort of philosophical points of view, particularly around groups that have money associated with them. So what I think that I would like to see, and maybe this is a stretch, but I think I would have liked to have seen something along the lines of what you do with each administration in the White House, which is that you reapply for your job come the end of your term. You resubmit an application. And if there's nobody else that's interested in your spot, so be it. But if there is somebody else interested, you at least have the conversation. And maybe some people on this board think number of years is a factor in the positive. Maybe some people think it's a number of years is a factor, maybe sometimes in the negative. But I think it should be a factor that's weighed. Again, you get the same 100 people a lot of the time. Most of the time, this isn't going to be an issue, but sometimes it is. And, sometimes it's really awkward for either members of the committee or even select board members to say, I have a concern about this person, but I know this person. And sometimes you don't say anything at all. And you let something slide that maybe shouldn't slide. So that was one of my concerns. On the flip side of that coin, the other thing I would like to see as one of the few people over the course of the past decade that I've lived here that has actually not been reappointed to a committee. If you're gonna choose not to reappoint somebody, have them in. We just turned somebody down for an appointment, but at least she was in the room to have the conversation with us. I know, speaking for myself, I would have liked to have had that opportunity. I heard about it when I was at the gym. That was fun. So that may be something I think we would consider as well. And then the third one in paragraph 3. I think in addition to soliciting the opinion of residents or publicly solicit from residents questions and comments, I think we ought to extend that also to the particular committee members and especially the chair. Again, sometimes you have people who haven't shown up for a meeting in 6 months or like barely meeting the attendance requirements, and you can only miss 6 in a year and they miss 5 and they're not pulling their weight and there are quorum issues. Again, sometimes the chairs of these boards quietly bear the brunt of doing a lot of the work while other committee members who are barely interested kind of hang on. That would be, I think, additional information that I think that would be helpful to this board when making a determination. That's it.
Any other questions or comments, Ms. Roy?
So there are, in addition to some committees that have no limits, there's 2 terms that are kind of used on there. Like, I think it's term limits and expiration dates, and some people's dates don't match. So there's going to be a lot of going through, I think, for that to say, which date are you going to go by for those people? Because I went through these pretty comprehensively, and I found more than one occasion on more than one committee where dates didn't line up. So in that case, which one are you going off of? Because it didn't make sense to me. And then the other question I have is, I know we got included a current reappointment process, how we do things now. And to me, it doesn't look familiar. It doesn't look like the process I've seen happen where we've invited people in and went through the whole decision-making process. It's usually just been like made a magic wand and one appointment in a motion and everybody got their seats back. So for me, if we're going to go down this path of inviting people in, especially if there's multiple people looking for a seat and we're going to have to interview them, should we include dates in this reappointment process that on the last, Tuesday of May or June or whenever it's going to be, that we're going to be dedicating a workshop for reappointments to ensure that it gets done and these committees don't get held up in June when the appointments haven't been made yet, or July?
So that's a good question. Sorry about, the timing, and then, what's the process look like going forward? To your point, you don't want to hold up a committee. What's the suggestion then?
Well, I would say have a dedicated workshop. So if they all expire in June, we want to make sure we're getting it done as close up to that limit as possible. So I would say the end of June, we're always going to be dedicating a workshop, and that may have to spill over into a second night, depending on any given year, how many seats are up. Maybe a Tuesday, Thursday kind of week. So it's a heavy week for us, but it's important work that we're doing. So.
Thinking about that just from logistics, if we look at our schedule, our June workshop would be technically June 8th, right? Or, some other year, it might be a little bit later in the month, but that could be feasible instead of waiting to the end of June. We're in the beginning of June to have that discussion. to your point about, because I'm worried about if we have 30 people come in, they want to talk to us about some reappointments. If we have a heavy year that year, right? I mean, that's a, you know, that can be a lengthy meeting. And I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just trying to figure out logistically, how do you line all those people up? What if they can't show? You know, how do we, you know, these are questions that, you know, just kind of pop to mind. How do you deal with that? You know, to your point, do you have 2 nights that you do it? So you can make one, you can't, you can come to the other one, and so be it. But
So to answer that, I would say in June, you're going to be having minimum 2 workshops. The workshop you would have had for regular stuff earlier in June, and the one in later June dedicated just for reappointments. You don't want to do it too early in June because now you're backing up the process of when you're notifying people that these seats are open. You want to get it as tight to June 30th as possible. And if people can't make it to their reappointment meeting, I mean, how committed to this are they? That should be an initial red flag that, you know, you're signing up to do this, that this is like one of the important ones that you're going to want to make it to. And yeah, I think it could spill over to a 2-night thing where it's a Tuesday, Thursday reappointments, and we'll see how it goes. And maybe they'll go quick. Some will be consent because nobody else is asking for those seats. So you wave a magic wand and those people got their seats back. And then the few that are contested, you bring them in and talk to them.
okay. All right. Any other questions, comment from the board? Okay, so Mr. Fazio.
I like the idea. I just want to make sure that we're giving people plenty of notice if we do this. I mean, I guess the one part of that I'll say I disagree with Colleen is like, you know, people, there are people that maybe work at night, right? And just really truly can't be there. And so I want to make sure that we're giving people enough opportunity to make space in their schedule to attend the workshop meeting. And, you know, maybe we have it out and post it as committees A through M we're going to be doing on this night. So be prepared if you're going to be back, if you're planning on coming to this board, and then, you know, N through Z the second night. And we just make it really clear to people what the timeline is and what our intention is. I think it's going to be tricky the first time around. I think it's, you know, like Peter said, it's going to be a long meeting and a little bit chaotic to organize, but I don't have a better suggestion. So I will say that I think that's the only thing that's really workable.
So I guess the next question is what structurally in this policy then, based on the input that we've seen tonight, needs to change, or does it need to change?
I would just suggest adding a number 4 where we prescribe the workshop at the end of the month, so that it's very clear to, you know, future boards, like, what were they thinking? Well, this is what we were thinking.
All right, Mr. Often.
So I think the thing that was discussed that we isn't really addressed in this is the positions that have no expiration date. I like Mr. Prisby's idea of just a periodic review, whether that's, I don't know, every 5 years, maybe, for those that don't expire, to just have a discussion, make sure there's still interest, and get public input, potentially input from the board or committee. I like that idea, just as a kind of a stopgap measure, to make sure that we still have candidates that are engaged and I guess, you know, productive and still interested in doing it. I can only imagine that there are people on boards and committees, because we have so many of them in Grafton, that are doing work that actually aren't that interested and might be willing and interested in stepping aside if there were other people looking to step up that had passion and interest into those positions. So I think it goes both ways. It benefits the committee and the individuals and this board to make sure that we have an engaged community.
So I guess from your from what you're seeing and what's presented here tonight, I guess the direction I want to know from you is where do we put that prescription in this policy? In the reappointment process? Do you see it in the new appointment, or is it just another section called review process? I don't know.
I would suggest just a brief last section, which would address specifically, positions that have no expiration dates, and that we address those separately.
Okay.
Aside from that, I think the board has discretion to not reappoint and to ask for members to reapply. I think that's pretty well described. And we would go through, a process of notifying the person who's got a position that we'd like them to reapply. And then we advertise that. We make sure that there's an opportunity for other community members to apply and express interest. And then we would go through the typical process of, interviewing the candidates and making a decision. So I think for me, that's pretty well laid out. I'm wondering if we should direct staff at this point, though, to put together that list that we would want prepared for this year.
So just so I capture, so the last section that discusses and addresses the committee assignments that have no expiration date, a periodic review. Okay.
Yep.
And then about gathering a list of, so it's something new you're looking for is getting that list together for the purpose of what? Yeah.
I'm just thinking we need, if we're going to implement this policy, we should be getting ready with a list of people that we want to be contacting, because the policy says 30 days. So we're talking about the end of May, which is coming up quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
There is a page on the website that has that list created already of everybody whose terms are expiring and a folder already made.
Great.
And we have that in the TA office ready to go, because we're already doing a similar process, I guess, is what I would say, or there's a mechanism in place to do that. So I think we can turn that around pretty quick. It's probably a better way to put that.
Great.
Okay. Mr. Fazio?
Does it say anywhere on here that you have to be a Grafton resident, or do we have that anywhere in our when people apply or are reappointed? And I can't think of a reason why you would volunteer for a community you don't live in, but it might just be something we want to make clear.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, so that came up on Disability Commission. We've got a member who joined, actually this board interviewed, who indicated that she would be potentially moving, who has now moved and is still active on that commission. So as far as I could find, there's no requirement that you're a resident.
Just the one other thing I'll mention is that I am not a resident. So if you make that a requirement, you got to be careful with your appointments. So it might be something that, you want to be at the board's discretion, right? There might be some committees where it doesn't matter. The Disability Commission, you could have a great member that moves to a different town and you're like, well, that they bring a wealth of knowledge to this group, so let's leave them on. And there'll be other ones where you'll say, well, if you don't live here, your input is less valuable. So you might want to just leave that to the discretion of your board when you're making those appointments.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
EDC is a good example too. On their charge that we were looking at for tonight, it says with a physical business in Grafton. So the business owner might not live in Grafton, but their business is here, so they get to be on the committee. So.
Right. That's a good point. All right. Any other questions, comments, anything else that needs to be added or revised in this policy tonight? Okay. Not hearing anything else. So there is a couple components that need to be added to this policy. with the board's permission, then if we can take this back and have these put in there and based our ideas put into writing on this, bring it back on Tuesday at the workshop, and this would be the one thing that we would take up under business as opposed to just having straight discussions. Is there any objections to the members for getting this, just due to the timeliness and getting this finalized out, before the end of the month? All right, no one's shaking their heads, but I got no thumbs up, so I'm assuming silence is a good sign that we can bring this back on Tuesday. Awesome, thank you. All right, let's do that then, if there isn't any further discussion. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Moving on, we have any select board member reports? Mr. Fazio.
Sorry, I'm having a problem with my mute button tonight. The fire chief screening committee has met a couple times. We meet again tomorrow night, but I just wanted to bring up that we met with Badge Quest. What was it, Evan? 2 weeks ago now? 2 weeks ago? Yeah. And so we had a good initial discussion with them, and we'll be able to bring forth a timeline to the select board sooner than later. So I think tomorrow we're going to start really digging into it, and I'll be able to answer more questions at our next meeting.
Okay. Any other select board member reports? I do have one, just talking about our second quarter schedule. So if you want to take a look at this, this is obviously April, May, and June. I know we finished up with April, but I just wanted to have the board review this and get some feedback on these dates and times, and just see if there's any objections to the schedule. Ms. Roy?
Not an objection, but I would like to add June 29th so that we could have our workshop ready to go for the reappointments.
Any objections to that?
Me.
Come on, Mr. Brisby, you're still here. You get to have a say.
Still here.
And you might be there as a committee member, so you might be joining us anyway.
Nope.
All right. Okay. This looks good to everyone. Then I'll send this off to Joanne, and I'll
I
have
have one more question.
Oh,
What's
Ms. White,
June,
sorry.
June 1st, it's a question mark. Does that mean we're not meeting, or we are meeting, or now that we're meeting the 29th, you don't want to meet?
Because that's the first Tuesday of the month, and it's right after town meeting. So I had that as a question mark in there. I kind of wanted to keep the date. God forbid if we need it for anything, emergent. But if the board is fine, I'm good with removing it.
You mean right before town meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, right before town meeting. I apologize. After the election, right before town meeting.
I think we should leave it.
I think it might be important for us to reorganize that meeting before town meeting. That might be a good idea. So even if it's a quick.
We're going to reorganize on the 27th, Doreen.
Oh, okay.
If I could, I would request that you just keep it so that if something comes up just prior to town meeting that we need board input on, you can do it. And if you get close to it, then we'll just, you can just say not necessary and move on.
Perfect. All right,
Okay.
I will keep it.
Thank you.
Everyone good with that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Fazio?
one more thing. Do we want to add a second workshop date on June 30th? If we need to?
Is that going to conflict with anybody?
No, but the other suggestion is too, we could always start a workshop at 6, just to give us as much wiggle room as possible.
This is just for like reserving stuff like, the Zoom accounts and stuff like that. So, this is just more for us. We can have these as placeholders, and when we get closer, if we finish on the 29th, then we won't need the 30th, right? to your point, Ms. Roy, if we can meet earlier, so be it. Okay. Any objections? Everyone good? Mr. Often, you good?
Good.
All right. Mr. Fazio, Ms. Roy, Mr. Prisby. All right. Thank you. Okay. That's all I have for select board member reports. Just pull up the rest of my. All right, so next up, TA reports. Mr. Brassard.
Yep, so the library obviously still ongoing, making good progress there. We're still on target for the June 8th substantial completion / opening date. We discussed the Upton Street RFP as part of the overview of the warrant. We are continuing on with our sidewalk projects. Bids have just come back, and I believe they're being awarded this week or next week. And then I added one section here that'll be kind of the consistent thing. I don't have an update for now, but it is a check-in to see where we are at with the goals that you have all produced, and to just try to keep that at the forefront of what we're discussing and doing, so that we make sure that we're hitting your goals with consistency. So, we've done enough things, I think, as people to know that if you don't keep refreshing that conversation, then those goals will slide by the wayside, and then we'll be reviewing them on an annual basis and wondering why we haven't met them. So, I'm going to add that there, and we'll continue to have that as an ongoing conversation. Other than that, I don't have any other update that we didn't cover at part of the meeting.
Any questions from the board? Okay. Next up, we had quite a bit of correspondence lately. Does anyone from the board have any questions or comment? Ms. Roy?
So we did receive a noise complaint for Reunion, and I just wanted to know how we were going to be handling those, so that it's not just something that builds and builds and builds, but are we notifying, did anybody reach out to Reunion to let them know so they have an opportunity to maybe correct things, or where we're standing with that?
Mr. Brassard? Yep.
So I spoke with the owner about a day after that noise complaint came in. Talked to them about the concerns. Really, I just explained it's from the standpoint of, so we've gotten one noise complaint, want to keep you in the loop. Let's keep communication open and ensure that we're addressing any concerns that may arise. I believe that at least I can't remember which member of the board, but also myself had asked the resident to also have a conversation with the folks at Reunion. Oh, that was you, Colleen. Good. And then, so I think that's all we've gotten so far. We haven't had a repeat from that same resident. So hopefully just communicating will help solve that. But if not, I think then it goes through the building department, zoning enforcement, I think, is who does noise complaints. And the PD obviously initially, but we want to keep it from happening. So hence the communication.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on correspondence? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to comment on a couple of letters we got around the 25 Worcester Street development. And, there's been quite a bit of concern about that. It seems like we've got a group of residents that have sort of gone their own way and are interested in defining their own version of what's going to happen there. I just wanted to say, I think it would be much better if that group of residents tried to work with the trust, tried to engage with them and work through the process. The trust is at the point where they're just evaluating different proposals. That there's nothing that's on the table that's definitive, that's been decided. you know, their job is to explore all their options and to try to figure out what's the best and highest use for that property, given their mission, which is to produce affordable housing. So it's a little bit upsetting when we get commentary like that. So I just wanted to encourage that group of people to work with the trust and trust in the process. That, you know, the trust isn't out to build tenements, or I'm not sure what they're thinking is going to happen there, but you know, this is senior housing that's going to not only help seniors be able to have appropriate housing in Grafton, but also allow them to move from Grafton and other communities out of houses that are too much for them right now into more appropriate settings to allow other families to move in. So, you know, you've got to take all of this into context and understand where the housing trust is coming from. So I guess I just wanted to say a little bit about that particular set of letters. It was a little bit disturbing.
Mhm. All right, anybody else? I'll just make a comment. I know one of the members up there, Mr. Warwick, addressed the letter, addressed specifically to me, but copied everybody. Just to let you know that I did respond to Mr. Warwick, and I basically hit reply all. And I need to make sure that that gets included in here, so it'll be in the next round of correspondence.
I do want to say, well, I'm sorry, I should raise my hand. I do want to say one thing.
Sure.
You know, obviously my name's mentioned in this stuff. Nobody ever reaches out to me. You know, I've never had a conversation with Ron Warwick. You know, I've never had a conversation with Joyce, who inferred right off the bat that we had done something wrong and stolen 25 Worcester Street in the dead of night. You know, when you start out the conversation that way, it's sort of really difficult. And I don't want to say too much because obviously everything I say is taken the wrong way. But, you know, there is, like Matt said, there's a process here. Reach out to us if you have questions. If you want to be constructive, if there's constructive input to be received, then I'm more than happy. But when it starts out with, well, you know, you did this in the dead of night and, you know, now we're going to try and draft a warrant article to retake land and we're going to, you know, try and recall people from the board. That doesn't seem constructive to me. It seems combative to me. And, you know, I'm not inclined to give it, I'm just not inclined to give it a lot of my time when it gets to that point. But if there is something constructive to say, more than happy to have the conversation. And by the way, there will be meetings that the trust will have publicly to discuss options once things get a little further down the road. By the next meeting, we are going to talk about bringing in Jennifer Goldson again as a consultant to help run some of those things for us. Because certainly with the sheer level of interest in this project, you know, I don't have time to reach out to everybody and answer everybody's legal questions about this. And I know the members of the trust probably don't either. So we're going to need somebody to come in and really do a better job than I think the rank and file trust members could do to really commit to outreach and do this the right way. Because, you know, the incentive here is to create as much affordable housing as possible. If we go only make everybody in town mad, then that doesn't serve us well in the future. You know, so obviously we want to work well with the people in the neighborhood, but we also want to accomplish a goal here. And, you know, the goal is to create affordable housing in a way that makes sense for the trust and for the community, and do that with everybody's best interest at heart. And, you know, people are going to disagree, and we can disagree without being disagreeable. But when it gets really accusatory right off the bat, then yeah, I'm out. You know, I'm less willing to entertain that stuff. Sorry.
All right, any other questions, comments on the correspondence that we received? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. All right, thank you very much. We don't have any discussions tonight that were on the agenda, but we do have one set of meeting minutes for April 13th of 2021.
I move the board vote to accept the meeting minutes of April 13th, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion of approving meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Okay. I don't have anything else. I will be sending out, we'll be sending out the agenda for next Tuesday. There's going to be I think few kind of little things on there like we discussed earlier, and some follow-up. So if anybody has anything that they want to add for the workshop for next Tuesday, please let me know by the end of tomorrow, so that way we can coordinate with staff if we need resources, and make sure that we've given ourselves enough time. But if there isn't anything else, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, everyone who participated. Thank you for your patience. We had a long discussion tonight on a lot of important things, and we will see you all next week. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, second to adjourn. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.